I'm Roland Angel, and I've lived here since 1956, and you've just heard from my son earlier. What I wanted to stress was safety, and that has to do with the Gibraltar launch and its 3,000-foot level. There's other places in the mountains along Camino Cielo that we launch, and we've been flying there since the fence went up, but nothing is near as safe as the Gibraltar launch. It's sheltered from the north winds, and it allows us easy access and, as I said, safety. When we fly off the very tops of the mountains, the winds can change, and sometimes we have to hike our gliders up hills, and as you get a little older, the 70-pound gliders get really hard to carry up a very high hill. And you get up there, the wind changes, and you still may push the factor and try and launch in conditions that you would not launch in other situations. The Gibraltar launch is such a good launch because we will back off, pack up our gear, and go down the hill if things change, even though it rarely changes there. It's much more reliable than any other part of the mountain. So hopefully you'll give us a chance to help you tear out the improvements and get our flying back. I thank you very much.
Robert Anderson, Ann Thomas, and Lane Rubin.
Madam Mayor and City Council, I've only been a resident here for 14 years, graduated from 2 of the colleges, and currently work out in Goleta at Santa Barbara Research Center. I'm 32 years old, and I've been flying for 5 years, and for 27 years previous to that, I was dreaming about it. Certainly, my fondest moments of living in Santa Barbara have been while flying above the coastal mountains, viewing the islands, the backcountry, the city, and its beaches all at the same time. I've flown by hikers, climbers, mountain bikers, horseback riders, all over them, over the mountains tops here, while soaring in our mountains. I waved to them, and they all waved back, and surrounded by them, I'm at home, and I have felt community with them and a sense of being as a part of the active Santa Barbara lifestyle that only Santa Barbara can bring me. I support the city staff's recommendations and also appreciate all the work that has gone into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann Thomas, Lane Rubin, and Dan Munger.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the Council. My name is Anodil Thomas, and I've been a resident of Santa Barbara since 1991. I started flying hang gliders in 1988 in Europe, and I've turned it into a passion of mine since then. I actually have flying dreams on a very regular basis these days, so it's pretty good. I've flown also in many sites around the world, Great Britain, France, Spain, the Caribbean, the United States, of course. The Gibraltar Road launch site strikes to me as being not only one of the most beautiful flying sites that I've ever flown in, around the world, and also one of the most reliable flying sites due to its location, as some of the other pilots have already mentioned, were able to fly almost on a daily basis in the local mountains, which does not happen in any other sites that I have ever flown in around the world. It is also and most of all, one of the most safest flying sites that I've ever flown in, once again due to the reliable conditions, the nature of the terrain, and also the ramp that has recently been built on the launch itself. And I on a regular basis, have been flying tandem with a local pilot, and the ramp that has been built has enabled us to increase the safety of the takeoff on tandem flights. Also, I would like to stress that tourism is my professional background, and I couldn't help noticing that the foot-launched flying activities are featured in many of the promotional materials that Santa Barbara makes available to the general public, both to the local residents and also to the tourists that come and visit the city. I did bring a few of them here, and I'll make them available to the council. The first one being the county destination guide for 96 and 97 does list hang gliding and paragliding as one of the local sports and recreational activities available. I also brought a really fun map of Santa Barbara, and I'll give it to you after the meeting also, that does has hang gliding represented as one of the flying activities available in the city. And finally, we have the Hang Gliding Festival, which is held on the 1st of January of every year, which is listed on the very front page of the 1997 area event. And this is quite a long list, and we have it on the very front page of the activities available in Santa Barbara. So I think we should really be proud of it. It is really an asset to the community, and I really urge the council to reopen the launch site so that we can again carry on with promoting the sport in the community. Thank you.
Lane Rubin, followed by Dan Munger, followed by Jay Farbman.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, I had submitted a letter to the editor and also to the council for review on both the park and the flying in general. And I guess one of the things that I noticed tonight, we've sort of viewed it as two separate issues, the park and then the hang gliding launch as being two separate sites. And I would like to see the fence come down as soon as possible. I fly hang gliders. I've lived here for about 18 years. I'm an engineer out at a firm in Goleta. If we could separate the two, as we've mentioned, I mean, the hang gliding launch, the improvements could be removed tomorrow. And the paragliding launch, I'd love to see that. The park retained in its entirety. I think it's a beautiful place to be, as everybody's mentioned, and if any of you have seen it, I'm sure you'd agree. Thank you.
Dan Munger, Jane Farbman, and Don Frudenthal.
I'd like to say that I think you should seriously consider the recommendations of your fellow councilman Tom Roberts, and especially his insight on removing the fence right away and not seeing any increased risk. Ultra high-risk sports, I really can't see the difference between paragliding and hang gliding as opposed to riding your bike on the beach or rollerblading on your beach. Or I addressed this council about 6 or 8 weeks ago when I had a broken wrist hiking on national forest land. I think Tom Roberts has brought up a very valid point they should consider in taking down the fence right away. I'd like to say that the city staff has done a great job in presenting the issue to the community and so forth. But I'd also like to say that the one issue of bailing out the property to Forest Service sounds like a good move. But on the other hand, why doesn't the city embrace this park, go through the permit process, take it as part of its own, make it Santa Barbara's Gibraltar Road launch site, and bring it home to the people of Santa Barbara?
Jay Farbman, followed by Don Frudenthal, followed by Tom King.
Evening. Excuse me. I'd like to just point out that hang gliding and paragliding is as much of an icon of Santa Barbara as sailing is. Hope you can take down the fence real soon and get the beauty back in the air. Thank you.
Thank you. Don Frudenthal on Chino. And then Tom King, and then Robert Millington.
Madam Mayor, council members, my name is Don Freudenthal. I've lived here approximately 12 years. When I came here, I seem to have heard over and over again liability. That seems to be the only thing driving this whole problem. There's so much liability that we're worried about nothing else. I think that's a mistake. I think that the council should take up the fact that this park can be used to bring in money. There was a long list of things that needed to be done to get this park into the community. Maybe if we can use it to bring in the tourists to pay for that long list, it would be worth it. I think it's a shame to throw this park out just because of the way it got started. Thank you.
Tom King, Robert Millington, and Tom Zink.
Madam Mayor, City Council members. My name is Tom King. I live and work in Goleta, but my passion in life is hang gliding. I'm one of only a few tandem hang glider pilots in the area, and up until recently, the Gibraltar launch site was my launch of choice. I really enjoy introducing people to the sport, people such as yourself that can enjoy the beauty alongside of me. Part of what makes it so safe is the topographical features, and also part of that slope stabilization, which is what considered the hang glider launch. It was listed as one of the things that must go, but part of what was considered to stay was slope stabilization and erosion control. I urge you to consider that ramp as part of the erosion control. Look closely at the pictures and see that it is merely a small concrete slab on top of the existing slope. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Millington, and then Ted Zink, and then Gilbert Roberts.
My name is Robert Millington. I moved to Santa Barbara in 1970 for the surf and stayed for the flying. This is a really intense and passionate activity we have. At launch sites, obviously, you've heard this is a safe place to launch. We need to have the fence down so that we can continue our activities safely. If it takes following staff's recommendation, fine. Whatever it takes to get the fence down. Thank you.
Okay. Ted Zink, followed by Clifford Roberts, followed by Glenn Miller.
Hi, I'm Ted Zinke. I've been a resident here since 1969, and I started flying back in the early 70s, so I've seen quite a few changes go on. I just want to add my voice to those who are in favor of removing the improvements and bringing down the fence so that the launch site can be opened up again. The only other point I would make is that this sport has never been a burden on this community, both from the site usage standpoint and from a liability standpoint. From a site usage standpoint, we don't require baseball fields or football fields or golf courses, anything like that. All we need is a relatively small area to launch the gliders and then an open area to land them. From a liability standpoint, I don't think we have ever been a drain or burden. I think in the 20 or 25 years of the sport, I can't think of any instance where there was a liability issue involved with this sport. And so just ask that you keep that in mind when you make your decision. And thank you very much.
Gilbert Roberts, Glenn Miller, and then Lee Kahn.
Madam Mayor and City Council members, I think as a sport we must be completely unique in taking out $1 million worth of insurance per pilot, specifically indemnifying the city for the mountain flying sites and the Douglas Preserve. And we did hand that certificate to Mr. Landreth. We also, and last but not least, signed a bulletproof waiver which is drawn up by our national organization, which more or less prevents anybody from suing a property which is allowing recreation on their land. I urge the City Council members not just to reopen the Gibraltar Road launch sites, but to support its pilots. My buccaneering days are over. I don't want to be, at my age, viewed as a liability or a statistic. I want the city of Santa Barbara to be proud of us, to celebrate with us that we have one of the top lady pilots in the United States, and that our vice president is the 10th men's pilot in the whole of the USA. And also that one of the best hang gliders ever made is built right here in Goleta. All this is largely due to the year-round flying. I urge you to reopen the site as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn Miller, followed by Lee Kahn, followed by Kip Harmer.
Madam Mayor, council members, thank you for the time. Two brief points I'd like to make. One is the issue of ultra-hazardous activities. Our firefighters here in the city and the county of Santa Barbara participate in ultra-hazardous tasks every day, and the way they mitigate the risk is by training and practice, so that what they undertake is not so hazardous, and knock on wood, we rarely ever lose one. We do the same thing. We train and we practice. And although from a perspective of people who don't fly, we do not consider this ultra-hazardous because we train and mitigate the risk. The last point is that as a physician, and particularly as a psychiatrist, I can professionally guarantee you that we are not a bunch or group of crazy thrill seekers. I'll certify that. What we are is a group of individuals with the dedication and the courage to pursue a dream of individualized foot launch flight that many people aren't able or have the courage to pursue. And my hope is that with our continued dedication and courage and your continued foresight, that now and future flying issues will be addressed in such a way that we can continue to pursue our dream. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee Kahn, Kip Harmer, and E.J. Steele will be third.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. Thank you for your time. I'm a student at UCSB, and I'm also an active hang glider in the local area, and I would just really like to see the fence come down, and I think the improvements are great, but not necessarily needed, so just whatever could be worked out would be great.
Okay, thank you. Kip Harmer, E.J. Steele, and Robert Trampino
Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council members. My name's Kip Harmer. I'm at least an 8th generation Santa Barbaran, and my ancestors, including Jack Northrop, would be proud of us flying in these local hills, and I think he'd be smiling at us. Please take down the fence. I support whatever it takes to take the fence down. Thank you.
Thank you. E.J. Steele?
Madam Mayor, City Council members, good evening. My name is E.J. Steele. I have earned and currently exercise a Bachelor's of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering, work here in town. I've also been a resident for 30 years in Santa Barbara. Hang gliding has made only positive contributions to every aspect of my life. It affords the luxury of camaraderie and a plethora of mentors. I've learned self-discipline, maturity, and respect for myself, Mother Nature, and all that surrounds me. I don't agree that the sport is a hazardous sport. I believe it is a tranquil and inspiring act of beauty that offers far less liability than many other activities currently allowed on city property. Again, each participant carries a $1 million liability insurance policy. Furthermore, city records will confirm that for the past 20 years, foot launch flight in the Santa Barbara area has displayed an exemplary record of safety. Foot launch flight has been among the many traditionally Santa Barbara activities such as hiking, biking, surfing, sailing, jet skiing, swimming, that make this area such a wonderful place to live and visit. We cannot fence off the entire city. It is my very real fear that the City Council seeks to prohibit foot launch flight in the Santa Barbara area. And if so, it follows logically that all the activities mentioned above are to be discontinued as well. Nearly 100 years ago, 2 American men, historically referred to as the Wright brothers, made the first step in human aviation using an aircraft that very closely resembles that of a hang glider. Their ingenuity and courage led to the commercial flight travel we see all over the world today, and the subsequent poetic words that the first man to walk on the moon uttered, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The mere thought that my local government would even consider the abolishment of foot launch flight a crucial stepping stone to flight and exploration from the Santa Barbara area is frightening, embarrassing, and most of all, heartbreaking. I respectfully request that the fence on Gibraltar Road launch site be removed and that the foot launch flight in the city of Santa Barbara be continued without unwarranted regulation in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Trampano, followed by Michael Brogy, followed by Steve Schwartz.
Good evening. My name is Robert Trampana. I'm a hang glider pilot and have been flying since 1973. Santa Barbara has a unique history of flying wing aviation. Once home to Jack Northrop, downtown Santa Barbara was the site of Northrop Aircraft's amphibious aircraft launch east of Stearns Wharf. Northrop Aircraft is the developer of the B-49 and the B-2 flying wing bombers. The Rogallo hang glider, a foldable flying wing, is a NASA spin-off that became an American sport in the early 1970s. The first of today's hang gliders, a scaled-down NASA Rogallo built in Southern California in the late 1960s, quickly spread throughout the world. In 1976, I started a business here manufacturing high-performance hang gliders, created a home, and started a family. My company, Seedwings Incorporated, located in Goleta, has led technologically and survived in business from 100 manufacturers till now just a handful. Seedwings has employed many local individuals, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on goods and services here in our local community, and leased thousands of square feet of commercial property. My livelihood depends upon the free access to fly off of Gibraltar Road, as I have for 21 years. In a 1976 meeting with the Forest Service, in which I was present regarding hang gliding launch sites, the Forest Service indicated as long as there were no man-made materials on any launch and our impact was just noticeable, they would allow our presence. This guideline of no impact on the environment has worked for hang gliding since its inception until recently. Thousands of Santa Barbara residents in the past 23 years have tried the sport of hang gliding. Hundreds safely launch off of Gibraltar Road and have had a rare opportunity to soar with red-tailed hawks and condors, fulfilling an ancient human dream of personal flight. Whether the launch site on Gibraltar Road eventually are under the Forest Service jurisdiction, I believe you should remove the fence on Gibraltar Road. Please allow the hang gliding off Gibraltar Road, the best site in the county. considering that Santa Barbara is the home of American flying wing aviation and is also home of the American sport of hang gliding?
Thank you. Michael Brogy, followed by Stephen Swartz, followed by Deanna Cramblett.
Madam Mayor, City Council. My name is Michael Brogy. I've been a resident City of Santa Barbara since 1978. I'm also a small business owner. Relatively new to the sport. I've been gravitating around it for about the past 2 years. Hopefully this will be the year that I do fly. I was surprised to find a general feeling of openness and mentoring by all the pilots here in Santa Barbara, along with a consistent focus on safety. Although I appreciate the city's caution during this period of discovery, I would encourage the reopening of the Gibraltar Road sites to facilitate the greater good and availability of a safe, familiar launch for all experienced pilots. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Swartz, Deanna Cramblett, and James Maddox.
Hi, my name is Steve Swartz. I live and work in Camarillo, California. I have a bookkeeping and tax business there. And there's been a lot of talk tonight about foot-launch flight being a possible liability. After listening to everybody talk, it occurred to me, and I hope it has occurred to you, that foot-launch flight in Santa Barbara is a tremendous asset as well. The reason I decided to come up here and talk, even though I'm extremely nervous about public speaking, is to let you know how foot-launch flight, paragliding in particular, has increased my contributions to Santa Barbara's economy. As a Southern California native, I've come to Santa Barbara all my life, in the past possibly 2 or 3 times a year. Since taking up paragliding about 1.5 years ago, I've been coming here at least that many times per month. And I've been bringing my family and quite a few friends with me as well. A typical day trip to Santa Barbara includes usually breakfast on the way and almost always dinner afterwards before returning home. Santa Barbara is a fantastic place to visit for a lot of reasons, but for me and for quite a few of the other people that I see on the road south, I think foot-launch flight is a tremendous asset, both as a spectator and as participants. So I'd like to urge that you remove the fence as soon as possible, and that you consider what an asset foot-launch flight is to Santa Barbara and the economy. Thanks.
Thank you. Deanna Cramblett, and then James Maddox, and then Langdon Quinton.
Good evening. My name is Deanna Cramblett, and I guess a lot's been said about liability. Personally, I think rollerblading has got to be more dangerous. That's allowed everywhere. And it's also redundant to say the park's beautiful as well as a safe launch spot, but what I think you want to realize is it's bringing a lot of income into the city. Just to paraglide, just to start out, it's good $4,000, $4,500. And I've met a lot of German pilots, Swiss pilots, whatnot up there. They're bringing money into the city for you. If the park could be preserved, it'd be great.
Thank you. James Maddox, Langdon Quinton, Mark Hansen.
Hello. My name is Jim Maddox, and I'm here to talk about the hang gliding and paragliding in Santa Barbara. I first would like to add my support to the city staff's recommendation for the Gibraltar Road launch site. Santa Barbara is a wonderful place to fly. I've had the privilege of meeting many pilots visiting Santa Barbara from throughout the world, all coming into town specifically to fly in our mountains. It would be a shame to lose this source of recognition in tourism. Hang gliding and paragliding is advertised in books about Santa Barbara, as well as the video postcard that is currently on sale advertising Santa Barbara. I would like the City Council to find ways to ensure that we, as citizens of Santa Barbara, retain the ability to enjoy all the freedom of flight that the city can offer. This may seem to be a very difficult task, but it is not impossible. I would also like to add this. The city now knows about us and our organization. I am currently on the board of directors of the Hang Gliding and Paragliding Club. We are available for you to communicate your thoughts and ideas to the flying community, as well as mediate any grievance or concern before the expense of building fences and taking the City Council's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Landon Quinton, Mark Hanson, and Bob Malloy.
Madam Mayor, City Council, I've lived in Goleta since 1968 and have been flying for about 8 years. I'm an occasional pilot, but I can assure you that my passion for the sport is great. And I can't really echo the words, or I can only echo the words that have gone on before me, but I would like to say two things, and that is thank you on behalf of all of us for hearing this issue in this detail, and staff. I think there's been a lot of work going into this issue and a lot of information exchanged. And I would also say that I will do personally whatever I can do to help you in your decision to restore flying. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Hanson, Bob Malloy, and Jeremy Haas.
Madam Mayor and City Council members, my name is Mark Hanson. I've been a physician in our community for 19 years. During that time, I've seen a lot of serious injuries and an occasional fatality from various outdoor activities. I simply will not permit myself to participate in a hyper-hazardous activity. After studying paragliding for about 3 years, I decided at the age of 42 to begin instructions after concluding that the risk was equivalent to that of equestrian activities in our community. After 856 logged safe flights, I still consider myself a novice. The true experts are the pair of nesting red-tailed hawks down the street from me at the Douglas Family Preserve. They've gotten to know me well enough that they will now routinely fly around me and hover next to me, showing me the field mouse that they've caught, in part perhaps to show me that even though I have a big colorful canopy, they're the ones that really own the air. Leonardo da Vinci diagrammed and evaluated the flying biomechanics of these birds 500 years ago. I really think that if he'd had aluminum back then, he'd be hang gliding. If he had nylon, he would have been paragliding. The ball was picked up by him 20 years ago here in Santa Barbara, and I'm very grateful to all the hang gliders in Santa Barbara who began and maintained the tradition of foot-launched aviation here. Please allow us to continue that tradition by bringing down the fence and letting us fly. Thank you.
Robert Malloy, Jeremy Haas, Tom Meyer, or Mayor.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, I'm Bob Malloy. I'm a resident of the Santa Barbara County. Been here for 34 years. I'm a business owner in a local accounting firm, and as that, I understand the liability issues that concern most business owners. I've been actively involved in hang gliding for 21 years, maybe slowing down a little bit the last few years. I personally do not support the staff's recommendation to remove all the improvements. I believe the improvements that are up there improve the safety of the site and defer erosion, and they provide for multiple uses and actually limit or reduce the risk to the city. I do support removing the fencing as soon as possible to reopen access to one of the safest, best launch sites in the San Ynez Mountains. I think we need to maintain Santa Barbara as a great place to live, which includes these type of activities. Obviously, we had a lot of tragedy the last few years, and I extend condolences to the people that lost family members up there just 2-3 days ago on an improved road. We've got death occurring. We don't have the same problems in hang gliding. We've been flying up there for 20-some years without any liability problems to date. I also support removing any ordinances that are on the city's books right now that prohibit flying in Santa Barbara, whether that's the Wilcox property, Parma Park, the Jesuit property, etc. I'm surprised no one here tonight has expressed any concern or reason to remove these launch sites except for the attorneys on the city's staff. I think it's really unusual to have 100% support in an audience like this. So I think you should listen to what the people are saying and try and promote a win-win situation. Promote flying, don't prohibit it.
Jeremy Haas, Tom Meyer, Fred Mellon, Richard Barthel.
Madam Mayor, City Council, I'm Jeremy Haas. I'm afraid I'm pretty much a stranger to everybody. So I should tell you, first of all, the most terrible thing, I'm an attorney. But in some relief from that, I've been a resident here of over 50 years since I was dragged here unwillingly with my snow sled from Minnesota by my father. And he looked around and said, "Where's the snow?" And we've been here ever since. My father was also an attorney. He was very involved in city affairs, as some of you may remember. He was police and fire commissioner for over 16 years and active in a number of ways. I mention this because this is somewhat relevant to what I want to say. And that is that in our role as attorneys, we found ourselves responsible for our clients' land, now known as the Jesuit property, out between the Wilcox property and Las Positas Park. And as a young lawyer, which I actually was once, I was given a great deal of the responsibility. We started off with a piece of property in the middle of a developed area that was a trash haven. It was beaten to pieces by four-wheel drive and motorcycle clubs using the hill for motorcycle climbs. It was a fire hazard with the overgrowth to the surrounding subdivision, all of which, as the town became more urban, we became more and more aware of. We had some dramatic city hearings at this over 20 years ago, and my father, thrashing around for a solution, decided to take one of the trespassers and entrust them. That was Ken de Russy. And as a result, for the next 20 years, we leased on a year-to-year basis the Jesuit property of 130 acres to the Santa Barbara Hang Gliding Association. As you can tell, it's unlikely I will ever even get up in one, and certainly never have been. What I do want to say is that, of course, we are in the position of a private landowner, and the laws then perhaps are somewhat simpler, and our liability exposure somewhat simpler than those of the city. But we certainly were considered a semi-public entity. Our clients were 600 miles away and could do nothing. We took the front line on it and had to deal directly with all these various problems. In those 20 years, I think my father's sixth sense, he was intelligence officer in the Marine Corps here in the Marine base, and as I said, very active in police and fire. He felt there was a sense of responsibility in the hang gliders, which I certainly found borne out by experience. And although it hasn't been spoken to so far, it's always been spoken to here, oh, the excitement and the wonders and the beauties. It sounds good to us landlocked and four-wheel vehicle owners. But what we found was something that Ken himself described to me at lunch. And that was that what they teach really, as Ken said, was not hang gliding. They taught risk management. You don't go up in one of those silly little fragile things unless you really know what you're doing. You're trained to evaluate the weather, you check your equipment, you're trained to be a very mature judgment maker in order to enjoy the pleasures of the flying that they speak to. We found that out in our 20 years with Ken and his association, and never once in those 20 years did we have an incident. Never once. Now, we were in the position of being able to lease our property directly to the association. They made us a co-insured. We had $1 million liability instead of $5 million. We gave them the exclusive control, which you may not be able to do with public lands, although this is perhaps water department land or something, and outside the city limits. With that exclusive control, they kept out the trespassers. They kept down, they managed the environment. We started to get plants and stuff back from the bruising they had before. They managed the grass, so there was no fire hazard. In those 20 years, I found that I felt I had an obligation to come down here tonight and say, in terms of responsibility, I can only speak the highest of Ken de Russy and his association from actual experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Mayer, followed by Fred Mellon, followed by Richard Barthel, followed by Carl Cameron.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. The first thing you're going to be very glad to hear is that everything that I sat down at my computer to read you tonight has already been covered, so I will not need to cover it. But I do want to let you know that I have been a resident of Santa Barbara for 46 years, and as of next week, 47 years. 21 years of that I've been flying my hang glider here, and I can't tell, I've flown all over the world. I have had that opportunity as I am employed by Delta Airlines as a flight crew member. And the only thing I need to cover that has not been covered, or it has been covered, but to a little more degree, was the risk of insurability, etc. Delta Airlines is happy to insure my life for way more than I'm worth, without any riders, without any exclusions whatsoever. And they are fully aware, and I have this about my hang gliding activities. They have no risk problem with hang gliding as a liability or as a high-risk sport. Prudential insurance companies have recently downgraded the liability underwriting of hang gliding. It is no longer considered an ultra, as I've heard tonight, high-risk sport. The statistics that you were hearing are using or have been used to identify hang gliding as a high-risk sport were based on underwriting policies from about 20 years ago. And there was a significantly increase in a larger degree of problems with this sport. With today's underwriting, that's not here anymore. An interesting note is that Delta Airlines insures me, but they won't insure the captain when he flies his personal aircraft. He cannot fly his personal Cessna and be covered under his life insurance policy, yet I can be covered flying my hang glider. And I appreciate my company's appreciation for my sense of risk management and safety. And I hope you will take that into consideration. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Fred Millen and Richard Barthel, Carl Cameron.
Good evening, Mayor Miller and Honorary Council. I have been a pilot for about 13 years. I have about 1,000 hours of airtime. And continuing on that liability issue, in the beginning we were sort of renegades where we would go in and develop sites. Now we are coming out party, you might say. The reason being the liability is not as high as it used to be. Our record is pretty good now. The FAA looks at us. We've got maybe 3 paragraphs of rules versus 600 pages of rules for commercial pilots, normal pilots. We've proven ourselves over the time to be a fairly safe sport. If you look at the other launches that have been accepted by communities around the country, they have done much better economically. They've become safer launches because development has become, more improvements have come on, like the ramp that was put in at launch. That was put there for safety. It wasn't put there as an improvement because we didn't think it would be bad. We're all really worried about putting that cement in, so there was a lot of discussion about that. Some guys decided to just do it kind of in the old way that launches have been developed through the years in other sites. And so those are the issues that we kind of look at and we say, well, should we do that or not? And it's really in our interest of safety that we've done all of these things through the course of time. So please don't be worried about liability. The FAA isn't worried about us. They leave us alone. They let us regulate ourselves. Thank you.
I think I should at this point clarify that the state law is what Mr. Wallace was referring to. So if you want the sport defined differently, get after the legislators. Richard Barthel.
Madam Mayors and
then Carl Cameron and Tim McCormick.
Members of the City Council. My name is Richard Bartel. I'm a local physician for internal medicine and rheumatology. I'm in support for flying here in the Santa Barbara community, and I'm a member of the Santa Barbara Hang Gliding and Paragliding Association. As one point, I want to stress that foot launch flying is an environmental, very clean sport, and although there have been some questions raised in concern or in regard of changes up at our launch site, I want to point out that we have the interest to be as clean in regard of changes in the environment as possible, and I'm in support of all recommendations you made to reassume flying and to take down the fence. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Carl Cameron, and then Tim McCormick, and then Lou Riffle. Carl Cameron.
Hi, I'm Tim McCormick, and I've been a resident of Santa Barbara County for 18 years, and I've used the Rainbow Skyport as both a paraglider pilot and a non-pilot. I think everyone involved in this issue understands the delicate nature of the problem which has been created by the improvements to the site without proper permits. But I also think it is clear to all who have been to the site, both pilots and non-pilots, that these improvements are an asset to the community and enhance the lives of those who use them, and that no one has been excluded from using them. I'm here today to urge you to please not respond to this situation in an uncaring, bureaucratic manner that would destroy this tiny and beautiful park. if you feel that sanctions or penalties must somehow occur to the offending volunteers, please consider that the penalties can be accomplished in a productive and constructive manner rather than destructive. If penalties must be given, would it not make more sense to have the offenders further improve the natural beauty of the surrounding area by removing some of the additional debris rather than destroy some of the assets? With a little creativity, the City Council has an opportunity and the discretion to be constructive rather than destructive. Who among you can disagree that it would not make more sense to remove some of the additional junk cars, boats, refrigerators, and old tires in the surrounding area than to spend the same energy removing park benches, picnic tables, retaining wall steps, and irrigation systems? I just got one more comment to make, and that I find it real striking listening to the people talk here this evening, that there is no active constituency calling for the removal or destruction of this park, or that flying should be eliminated in the area. I think what we have here are city attorneys letting you know that there are some liability issues involved here, and that when you really look at the underlying issues involved and the responsibility of the people that have developed this site and the flyer's safety record involved here, that you can come to the conclusion that these are acceptable activities and acceptable risks, and find some way to work together with this responsible group of people and realize that it's an activity that is compatible with which we hold dear in Santa Barbara. Thank you.
Thank you. Lou Riffle, followed by Tom Burnaby, followed by Bill Tyree, I guess it is, from Ventura.
Madam Mayor, City Council, I'm Lou Riffle, Santa Barbara native, former board member to the club. I've been working with the board on this issue, and I'd like to commend the city staff on an excellent job. They're extremely resourceful. Their long tenure in their positions have allowed them to be very perceptive on these solutions. I heartily support what they want to do. And finally, I'd like to add that my main concern as a hang glider pilot in Santa Barbara is safe launches, safe landing, and my park is in the sky. Thank you.
Thank you. John Barnaby, and then Robert, and I'm not sure of the last name, but he's from Ventura. Tibby? John Barnaby?
Good evening, City Council and Mayor. I'm Rob Tybee. I'm from Ventura, and I come up to Santa Barbara because it's such an incredible place to fly. I fly paragliders. First and foremost, I'd like to support any decision that you make that would allow us to continue flying from the site. Secondly, I'd also urge that you consider leaving the park as it is, since it is such an incredible park, very beautiful, and can be an asset to the city in both paragliding concerns and tourism concerns. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Don Gordon, and Ines Roberts, and Eric LaRue.
Hi, I'm Don Gordon. I've lived in Santa Barbara off and on since 1980. I've flown hang gliders for 10 years of my life. I haven't flown in the past 9 years, but I'm really concerned about hang gliding in Santa Barbara. I think it's a great thing, and it should continue at this particular site because it is such a safe site. Also, the recommendations for removing the improvements, except for the improvements that are erosion control, and the concern that that would continue to be some form of improvement. There are erosion control all up and down that road, so I don't know how valid that is. Thank you.
Okay. Ines Roberts, and then Eric LaRue and Paul Van Zoodle, and he is the last speaker.
Good evening, Madam. I'm sorry, I'm more nervous than taking off from the highest mountain.
Well, don't be.
So
just
my
pretend
name is
you're hang gliding.
Yes. My name is Ines Roberts, and I'm a hang glider pilot, and I have advanced rating. Because of this event, which is very, very important for us, I even will admit to you my age. I had my first lessons, a gift from my husband, on my 50th birthday, and I have been flying for 17 years. This is not in order to brag, but I want to tell you what it means to be in this community of hang glider pilots, because I just have only great, wonderful things to say. Most of my 646 flights have been here in our mountains. I also flew in Hawaii and Mexico, but I am cautious, and I get that support at the same time. I have never known a group of people, my fellow pilots and buddies, who I can trust with all my heart. They are the nicest, responsible, supportive people I have known. Santa Barbara should be proud of them, as I am. I beg you to give us from now on your full-hearted support, as it's happening in other countries. Please forget about the liabilities. Think of the future. We cannot always be handicapped by this. Please support us and remove that offensive fence. And let us fly in peace and celebrate with us, because flight with the birds has become a reality for men and women. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric LaRue. Eric LaRue. And Paul Van Zut, I'm not sure, Zoodle from Goleta. He'll be the last speaker.
Good evening. My name is Paul Van Zyl.
Oh, you're the last speaker then. I'm sorry. Good enough.
I'm here to support hang gliding in Santa Barbara. I'm not a hang glider myself, but I am a commercial pilot and flight instructor. I'm also a PhD student in geography at UCSB, where I have taken advantage of the local mountains, both for recreation and research. It would be a shame to restrict an activity which these people are so passionate about and which has virtually no adverse environmental impact. These hang gliders are quiet, non-polluting, and don't even leave footprints after they take off. Let's let them fly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the public comment.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Mrs. Jones.
I'd like to make a few comments before council begins its discussion. And these are summary comments from our earlier presentation. First of all, the park, to in fact become a park outside the city, in the county, and in the Forest Service, would require extensive permitting, as outlined by Bob Roebuck. And as you know, we have a letter from the Environmental Defense Council that sets forth, again, what they see to be the necessary environmental review and permitting for a park in this area. And they do not hesitate to point out the issues of non-native plants introduced because of the park, and water diversion from streams supporting endangered species. The status quo, that is, an improved park setting with improvements specific to supporting hang gliding and paragliding, exposes the city to liability. Therefore, removal of the park-like improvements and those certain improvements which are specific to the sport, we believe will reduce city exposure to liability.
Kip Harmer.
Madam Mayor, council members, thank you for the time. Two brief points I'd like to make. One is the issue of ultra-hazardous activities. Our firefighters here in the city and the county of Santa Barbara participate in ultra-hazardous tasks every day, and the way they mitigate the risk is by training and practice, so that what they undertake is not so hazardous, and knock on wood, we rarely ever lose one. We do the same thing. We train and we practice. And although from a perspective of people who don't fly, we do not consider this ultra-hazardous because we train and mitigate the risk. The last point is that as a physician, and particularly as a psychiatrist, I can professionally guarantee you that we are not a bunch or group of crazy thrill seekers. I'll certify that. What we are is a group of individuals with the dedication and the courage to pursue a dream of individualized foot launch flight that many people aren't able or have the courage to pursue. And my hope is that with our continued dedication and courage and your continued foresight, that now and future flying issues will be addressed in such a way that we can continue to pursue our dream. Thank you.
Thank you. Lee Kahn, Kip Harmer, and E.J. Steele will be third.
In instructions after concluding that the risk was equivalent to that of equestrian activities in our community. After 856 logged safe flights, I still consider myself a novice. The true experts are the pair of nesting red-tailed hawks down the street from me at the Douglas Family Preserve. They've gotten to know me well enough that they will now routinely fly around me and hover next to me, showing me the field mouse that they've caught, in part perhaps to show me that even though I have a big colorful canopy, they're the ones that really own the air. Leonardo da Vinci diagrammed and evaluated the flying biomechanics of these birds 500 years ago. I really think that if he'd had aluminum back then, he'd be hang gliding. If he had nylon, he would have been paragliding. The ball was picked up by him 20 years ago here in Santa Barbara, and I'm very grateful to all the hang gliders in Santa Barbara who began and maintained the tradition of foot-launched aviation here. Please allow us to continue that tradition by bringing down the fence and letting us fly. Thank you.
Robert Malloy, Jeremy Haas, Tom Meyer, or Mayor.
To everybody. So I should tell you, first of all, the most terrible thing, I'm an attorney. But in some relief from that, I've been a resident here of over 50 years since I was dragged here unwillingly with my snow sled from Minnesota by my father. And he looked around and said, "Where's the snow?" And we've been here ever since. My father was also an attorney. He was very involved in city affairs, as some of you may remember. He was police and fire commissioner for over 16 years and active in a number of ways. I mention this because this is somewhat relevant to what I want to say. And that is that in our role as attorneys, we found ourselves responsible for our clients' land, now known as the Jesuit property, out between the Wilcox property and Las Positas Park. And as a young lawyer, which I actually was once, I was given a great deal of the responsibility. We started off with a piece of property in the middle of a developed area that was a trash haven. It was beaten to pieces by four-wheel drive and motorcycle clubs using a hill for motorcycle climbs. It was a fire hazard with the overgrowth to the surrounding subdivision, all of which, as the town became more urban, we became more and more aware of. We had some dramatic city hearings at this over 20 years ago, and my father, thrashing around for a solution, decided to take one of the trespassers and entrust them. That was Ken de Russy. And as a result, for the next 20 years, we leased on a year-to-year basis the Jesuit property of 130 acres to the Santa Barbara Hang Gliding Association. As you can tell, it's unlikely I will ever even get up in one, and certainly never have been. What I do want to say is that, of course, we are in the position of a private landowner, and the laws then perhaps are somewhat simpler, and our liability exposure somewhat simpler than those of the city. But we certainly were considered a semi-public entity. Our clients were 600 miles away and could do nothing, and we took the front line on it and had to deal directly with all these various problems. In those 20 years, I think my father's sixth sense, he was intelligence officer in the Marine Corps here in the Marine base, and as I said, very active in police and fire. He felt there was a sense of responsibility in the hang gliders, which I certainly found borne out by experience. And although it hasn't been spoken to so far, it's always been spoken to here, oh, the excitement and the wonders and the beauties. It sounds good to us landlocked and four-wheel vehicle owners. But what we found was something that Ken himself described to me at lunch. And that was that what they teach really, as Ken said, was not hang gliding. They taught risk management. You don't go up in one of those silly little fragile things unless you really know what you're doing. You're trained to evaluate the weather, you check your equipment, you're trained to be a very mature judgment maker in order to enjoy the pleasures of the flying that they speak to. We found that out in our 20 years with Ken and his association, and never once in those 20 years did we have an incident. Never once. Now, we were in the position of being able to lease our property directly to the association. They made us a co-insured. We had $1 million liability instead of 5. We gave them the exclusive control, which you may not be able to do with public lands, although this is perhaps water department land or something, and outside the city limits. With that exclusive control, they kept out the trespassers. They kept down, they managed the environment. We started to get plants and stuff back from the bruising they had before. They managed the grass so there was no fire hazard. In those 20 years, I found that I felt I had an obligation to come down here tonight and say, in terms of responsibility, I can only speak the highest of Ken de Russy and his association from actual experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Mayer, followed by Fred Mellon, followed by Richard Barthel, followed by Carl Cameron.
Advanced rating. Because of this event, which is very, very important for us, I even will admit to you my age. I had my first lessons, a gift from my husband, on my 50th birthday, and I have been flying for 17 years. This is not in order to brag, but I want to tell you what it means to be in this community of hang glider pilots, because I just have only great, wonderful things to say. Most of my 646 flights have been here in our mountains. I also flew in Hawaii and Mexico, but I am cautious and I get that support at the same time. I have never known a group of people, my fellow pilots and buddies, who I can trust with all my heart. They are the nicest, responsible, supportive people I have known. Santa Barbara should be proud of them, as I am. I beg you to give us from now on your full-hearted support as it's happening in other countries. Please forget about the liabilities. Think of the future. We cannot always be handicapped by this. Please support us and remove that offensive fence. And let us fly in peace and celebrate with us, because flight with the birds has become a reality for men and women. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric LaRue. Eric LaRue. And Paul Van Zut, I'm not sure. Zoodle.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Mrs. Jones.
I'd like to make a few comments before council begins its discussion. And these are summary comments from our earlier presentation. First of all, the park, to in fact become a park outside the city, in the county, and in the Forest Service, would require extensive permitting, as outlined by Bob Roebuck. And as you know, we have a letter from the Environmental Defense Council that sets forth, again, what they see to be the necessary environmental review and permitting for a park in this area, and they do not hesitate to point out the issues of non-native plants introduced because of the park and water diversion from streams supporting endangered species. The status quo, that is an improved park setting with improvements specific to supporting hang gliding and paragliding, exposes the city to liability. Therefore, removal of the park-like improvements and those certain improvements which are specific to the sport, we believe will reduce city exposure to liability. I think it's been recognized, and we want to again say that we as staff, that staff from the Public Works Department, from the Risk Management Division of Finance, the City Attorney's Office, the City Administrator's Office, we have all sought solutions to open the site again and to reduce our liability exposure, leaving the site available for individuals to choose to use as a site to launch from for hang gliding and paragliding. And the solutions that we've recommended to you to accomplish these things are to, in the immediate term, remove the park and paragliding improvements, those certain improvements that we outlined in the report, allowing the site to go back to its unimproved state as much as possible as an immediate step to leading to removing the fence and returning the use to those who choose to use it for recreation purposes. And then to turn the property over to the Forest Service, whose mission it is to support these kinds of recreation uses on undeveloped property. The Forest Service has also said they want the property with the improvements removed. Staff's effort has been consistent with an intention to not abolish hang gliding or paragliding, and we believe the recommendations that we've offered you accomplish that. And in fact, would make, in the long run, and not so long run, in 6 months or less, put the property under the management of the Forest Service, which would protect the areas in its undeveloped state. And we included the letter from the fire marshal in order to point out that we think there is value in it being under the protection of the Forest Service to maintain it as an undeveloped area. And in their management of this property, to really put it in the hands of an agent who would manage it and own it for recreation uses, and most of all would support and sanction hang gliding and paragliding on the site. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, and we appreciate the comments that came from the public in support of staff's efforts in this regard.
Okay, are there any other staff comments? Mrs. Tripp-Jones, are you making the staff comments?
Those are our comments.
Okay. Mr. Roberts, then Mr. Garcia, and then Mrs. Bloom and Mr. Hart.
Well, first off, I do want to say that Mr. Landreth and Roebuck and Mr. Pike and Mr. Wallace have done an exceptional job. I mean, they have a role to play, they have a job to do, and that is to protect us, the city. And I think that they have come to this issue with the desire to try to make this happen. And I don't in any way, shape, or form. I mean, you've heard lots of compliments, and I think you deserve them all. You know, from my personal point of view, when I went up there for the first time about a month ago with Councilmember Hart and Beaver, I went up there thinking, you know, this is not okay. Somebody just went on city property and did this, and, you know, let's go see this thing. And I got there, and my point of view was changed 180 degrees when I saw what had been done. I don't condone what was done from the sense of taking something into your own hands and going and doing it, but it has been done. It's what's here right now. And that's what we have to deal with. We are in the process of attempting to build a skateboard facility, a municipal skateboard facility. And with that's going to go risks and liabilities. I don't see a whole lot of difference. You know, I'm a hockey player, okay? I've been in the hospital a few times with concussions and broken bones, and I suspect I've had more injuries than anybody in this room has hang gliding. And maybe that's what shapes my point of view on this. But I think that it's unfortunate that something is not understood, or it may not be common, and that's why people react to it a certain way. Because I think that's what we're dealing with here. The statistics and all the things we've heard and observed don't bear out the fear. But we have state laws to contend with, and that's Mr. Wallace's job. My personal preference, I mean, there's municipal ice rinks all over America with hockey teams playing with a lot more probably dangerous things going on. And my personal preference is to leave the park as it is and simply accept that this is something that we need to do, and we need to move forward, and we can't be held back by these fears. I don't think that I have the votes on this council to do that tonight, even though I think everybody would like to, but that's what I would like to see happen.
Okay, Mr. Garcia.
Well, first of all, I must say I am very impressed with the speakers, the passion, and the articulate manner in which you presented your desire to want to fly. I'm not sure it's because you get out there and really get that experience of wanting to fly, or it's because you have your own psychiatrist that flies with you. I'm not sure. But I must say that makes me want to, from sitting here, find a way that we as a city can accommodate those needs. I mean, it's something that you just want to do as a city. And I know that we're here and we're doing a lot of things as a city that accommodates the needs of citizens all over our community. And actually, Santa Barbara is probably the playground of the whole South County and probably the Tri-Counties, and from all over the world, I guess, from that standpoint. This is a destination where people come. And there's a lot of activities that they do. If you ever go down to the bike pedestrian walkway on the beach and you see people on roller skates and roller blades and surreys and walking and darting in and out, well, I consider that to be a real challenge, and I don't know what the risk management of that is. I know that when we looked at at our roundabout, there was real concern, a roundabout that we were trying to do on Milton Street. There was real concern about liability on that, but we wanted to do that. The community wanted us to do that, so we looked at a way to make it happen. We probably try to minimize as much as possible the risk. So I would agree with Councilmember Roberts. I mean, that's my desire to want to do that. At some point, though, I do hear the need to want to fly again, and I really can empathize with that need after hearing you speak. So I think we got to find a way to take that fence down and to remove the improvements, unfortunately. But I would urge then, if there is a permit process that needs to be getting started, that you probably start a permit process. I could support a park up there of some kind if it meets, the challenges of the Environmental Defense Council, which I'm sure with your articulate manner in which you present your case, you can probably take it up with them, and you would have a good chance to get passed. But that's something that has to, that's a process you have to go through. And unfortunately, cities have to go through these processes. But I would have I know I would be supportive of wanting to have that facility up there for the use of our community.
Mrs. Bloom?
Thank you. I've learned a lot about hang gliding. I actually was thinking about it until somebody mentioned a mouse hanging out of some birds right next to me. That didn't seem like a great idea. I really do admire the thoughtful, responsible nature of this sport, which I did not know a lot about before, but I really do admire it and feel that the city is very proud of hang gliders already. I'm anxious to get the launch site opened. I would hope that when you land, you do land in Parma Park, because I've heard about some landings outside the park, and that kind of scares me. And I think our staff has been quite thoughtful, and I do appreciate that. My question, I guess, has to do with the improvements. In other things, when somebody puts in rails or somebody starts watering a hillside, I know when I was on Planning Commission, we would question erosion and that kind of thing. Has that analysis been done? Have we looked into whether watering the grass up there is going to cause more of a slide? And I think that was mentioned by a couple of hang gliders.
Mr. Roebuck?
Yes, we had an inspection or field trip of the facility by a senior building inspector as well as an environmental analyst, and it was their recommendation that the irrigation cease immediately, and that, as I mentioned before, that the grass, however, remain for erosion control purposes. I would say that I've lost my train of thought. I apologize. It's getting very late. I'm sorry. Could you?
Well, the question you've already answered the question about the watering. The other question I had to do about the railroad ties too. You've recommended leaving them in. So I guess the answer to that is, have you analyzed what would happen if you take them out?
Okay, yes. There has not been a professional analysis of the slope stabilization and all those other things. That's what would be needed if effort was, exerted to perfect a park-like location. Yeah. What the mode we're in right now is an enforcement mode, and basically trying to return the land to a state that existed before all these improvements started, with the exception of the retaining walls and the steps, which we feel would be detrimental to remove at this time.
It seems like it's a lot like the steps that were put in on the cliff over the Henry's Beach, where those railroad ties were put in, and now we're having a hard time taking them out. So, I think we need to get on with this as quickly as possible and remove the things like the cement building and that kind of thing. That's an obvious one to me. But I do have concerns about removing railroad ties and steps. And so I'll go along with the staff.
Okay. Mr. Hart?
I also want to echo my fellow colleagues' comments about what a great audience you've been and respectfully presenting your points of view, both sides, everybody's perspective. I want to thank the staff for doing a lot of work on this too. I know it's been very complicated. I think in the final analysis, the staff's recommendations are very sound. It accomplishes all the goals that everybody really is out and after, which is to begin to do flying again. You know, there's a couple of people mentioned, I think, that very appropriately, that the park is the air, it's not the ground. We have lots of parks, there's lots of other places to get those views, there's lots of other places to sit on the grass. Perhaps some of the people who are so believe this park is so unique should actually go up to Hilderay Park in the city of Santa Barbara and look down. It's a very similar orientation to the city from the other side of the town. And the only thing that I would take issue with the staff is, I think in a purist form, the idea that we can't take the fence down and expect these people to do the right thing and take out the improvements. I understand that that increases the risk that the city has. It exposes us to greater liability than would exist if we took the staff's recommendation to wait until those improvements were done. I could see how we would have a stronger case in the event of an accident in front of a judge to be able to say that we had taken every effort possible to return the property back to its original condition. I think that'd be a very powerful legal position. But my job here is to take the advice of the professional folks who give us information about that and to weigh that with other issues. And in my judgment, we can live with 30 days of exposure to having that fence down, asking people to remove the improvements and allow flying to continue. And if a motion like that doesn't meet enthusiasm from my colleagues up here, then I'd like to even take it in pieces and recognize that there are really two launch sites here. There's a launch site at the point which has the concrete improvement, and then there's the paragliding facility with the significant improvements that Mr. Truax has done, and that we should be able to separate those, and we should be able to remove the concrete launch ramp that the hang gliders have been using very quickly and be able to remove the fence that restricts flying from that site sooner than we would be able to remove the improvements from Mr. Truax's construction and get that part open. So I could make a motion now, or I can wait for other folks to talk.
There are a couple of council members want to speak still, Mr. Hart.
Okay, that's fine.
Mrs. Langer.
I want you all, excuse me, I want you all to know that I'm supportive of your sport. I'd like to see you get back to it as fast as possible. But as I mentioned much earlier in this discussion, I'm also supportive of our city processes and our city rules. And when we had folks putting in improvements on our beach bluffs illegally without permits, we've been very firm with them about the necessity to take these out, and we didn't allow them to keep on using them part-time while they did other things. So I'm going to support the staff recommendation, which I think is fully appropriate, and will get the site back to full use. It was used as an unimproved site previously, very successfully and happily. I think it can be so again. I think one of the important things that we need to think about preserving, thinking about protecting in this town is a view of our unimproved hillsides. And the more improvements that go up on them, the more we destroy something that's very precious as a view for all of us who live down here on the lowlands and don't fly.
Mrs. Beaver?
Thank you all for being here. Since I've been on council, this is twice the size of the previous largest group we've ever had speak to us. And it's the most amazing thing. Usually I keep track of how many people speak on each side. I haven't had to keep track. You have all spoken on the same side. And that is really heartwarming. When I first heard about this illegal park, I organized an expedition to go up there. And I asked a couple of fellow council members, and Mr. Roebuck and Mr. Wilson took us up. And I went up there with the idea that this absolutely we can't have an illegal park. And then I saw it, and it's the most beautiful place I've ever seen. And it absolutely breaks my heart that we're going to have to undo this. You know, we always talk about precedents. Well, you know, that if we allow this, this will set a precedent. I really believe that if there are other fools like Mr. Truax who are willing to put in that kind of time and effort, you know, I would cheer on the precedent, but that isn't what we get to do here tonight. It sounds, unfortunately, that the only thing that will get this area opened again very quickly for hang gliding is to take out the improvements. And that really bothers me, but it sounds like I heard more of that than let's just keep the park. And so I would be willing to support a motion that Mr. Hart is going to make, if he makes it like he said he was going to make it.
Okay, Mr. Roberts, I guess you've already spoken. I haven't said anything, so I guess I better say something. Well, I spoke earlier, but I guess I have a very serious problem, along with Mrs. Langer, that this park was developed without any kind of permitting, without any kind of recognition that this was public property. And I want the hang gliders and the paragliders to be able to enjoy their sport immediately, but I do think the improvements have to come out. And certainly if the Forest Service is going to take over this property, which I think makes a great deal of sense because they're more involved in this kind of thing than we are, and they're going to want the improvements out. So I will be supporting the staff recommendation.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Roberts.
Oh, well, I won't repeat myself. I'm sure you appreciate that. Obviously, hearing the way the conversation is going, and saddened as I think Councilmember Beaver also is, I don't want to see the improvements taken out, but if that's the only way to get the fence down, then that's what we shall do. Councilmember Hart, I would also support your motion if you chose to make it.
Okay. Madam Mayor.
Yes, Mrs. Tripp-Jones.
I think it'd be helpful to point out that if council proceeds with directing that the improvements be removed, we would require that they be removed in a 2-week period, and if they're not removed, then we would ourselves go in with a contractor and remove those improvements so that we could get the fence down, and of course we would have to charge Mr. Truax for those costs. I think we expect cooperation there, but our intent would be that it would happen very quickly one way or the other.
Okay.
Well, with that information, I think I would make a motion that we remove the fence tomorrow, give the hang gliding community collectively, and I really hope that folks take a sense of responsibility, you know, both the folks who are supporting the park and the folks who just want to get back flying, because the truth is that, you know, Mr. Truax didn't do this by himself, and there was some sort of tacit acceptance, if not approval, from others to help him remove these improvements over the next 2 weeks, and if they're not improved, that the staff will go out and do that for them and charge appropriately and put the fence back up, I guess. And that the staff continue to negotiate with the Forest Service about the exchange and donation, whatever is the most appropriate course for the property. And I think that covers all the pieces of the puzzle.
I'll second your motion.
Okay, there's a second. Now, can I have the secretary read this back so we're all sure we know what we're voting on?
That the fence would be removed tomorrow with an opportunity to be given to remove any improvements within the next 2 weeks, and staff is directed
Any improvements or all improvements?
All the improvements specified in the staff
Within
report.
the
We would
next 2
leave
weeks?
the materials that they suggested to leave within the next 2 weeks.
And staff is to continue to work on negotiating with the Forest Service.
Okay, there's a motion before us.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Garcia.
I just want to mention I can support the motion because I think it'll achieve the goal of getting people flying right away. I think some people really need it.
Well, I think there's a domestic problem back
Right.
there.
So I support that desperate plea there, but I think it is important that there is a commitment to really get those improvements out, because there is a process that we have to go by in the city. If we were leaving there, we would have to go to that process, and that would be a lot of legal battles potentially, and could potentially hold the hang gliders or the launching to occur. So I would support that motion.
Okay.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Mrs.
just
Langer.
for clarification, is there a 2-week deadline in that motion for the removal?
Yes, there's a 2-week deadline for the removal of the improvements.
That's 2 weeks from today.
Tomorrow, when the fence comes due. 2 weeks after the fence comes down, and the fence goes back up if it hasn't been done in this city. Does that make sense? I mean, I think we need to have some sort of
Madam Mayor.
penalty.
Yes,
for
Mrs. Tripp-Jones.
Practically speaking, I wouldn't recommend to you that you direct us to put the fence back up, but that if
You'll
If
just
Mr.
take out the
Truax doesn't
improvements and
remove
charge
the improvements 2 weeks from tomorrow, then the city make the arrangements to have the improvements removed and to bill him accordingly.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, have that changed to the motion or
Is
clarification.
that all right with the seconder? Okay. Okay, we now have a motion before us. All those in favor say...
I want to make one more comment. Can you just take lots of pictures of this beautiful place before we destroy it?
I guess before we vote, I want to add my comments to the manner in which you've conducted them yourselves this evening. This has been a very good hearing, and you've spoken, and you've been brief and to the point, and we really appreciate it. So with that, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. We still have quite a bit of business to do, so I would appreciate it if you would leave as quietly as possible so we can continue with our business. Thank you.